Saw a lot of glassy eyes as we get through this late afternoon. I'll be quick. I'll get through my section and get us close to beverages of the alcoholic variety, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to talk about modern innovation. We talked about a lot of this today already and how that relates to digital transformation. As I said at the beginning, I'm a strategist, so I'm going to take it up to the next level. So I'll give you the big picture view of what's going on, I think, in the marketplace, what Red Hat thinks is going on in the marketplace. I'm going to allude to some analysts such as IDC. Sorry, Maureen, there's some Gartner in there too, and PwC. Is that okay? And talk about what's going on a grander scale, where we're going on a bigger time scale, and what's happening in the market. At our customer summit, how many people went to Red Hat Summit last May in Boston? Not a lot. I would highly recommend you attend our summit. San Francisco this year, right, Red Hatters? It's 3 days. It's not a sales and marketing conference at all. You learn a lot. There is a lot of great sessions. Our CEO, who is a former strategist, he was at Boston Consulting Group for a number of years, Jim Whitehurst, he got up there, I think the first thing he said, a very bold statement, planning is dead. Planning is dead, and he put in brackets as we know it. And what he said was, in the old days of strategic planning, you defined a vision, a 3 to 5 year outlook, how you're going to differentiate yourself in the market, you're going to build a plan to get there, and those that execute the plan and have a good vision, take market share. And these are the incumbents. With things happening so fast in the market, he basically said it's really hard to predict what's going to be here 3 to 5 years out. So rather than focus on that, look at restructuring the organization, look at agility, and look at a potential sort of platform to innovate on so that you're fast and you're agile and can react to your competitors. So in many ways, we're sort of adopting the agile methodology or the DEVOPS kind of philosophy movement. Last week, Frank Jens from IDC, he did their predictions for 2018. This is one of the predictions he put up for worldwide IT industry. This concept of sort of a new digital transformation platform. He said 60% of organizations by 2020 will have instantiated this kind of centralized platform for innovation. And a lot of the attributes of this new platform we've been talking about today, such as API enabled, externally facing, having customers, partners, and suppliers connecting to that platform through APIs, a data-driven kind of platform where data it comes in through various pipelines and gets routed to artificial intelligence and machine learning kind of capabilities for the organization. And that effectively becomes the intellectual property of the company and how it interfaces with its customers and partners. I think Maureen said last night over dinner, she said she's working on the intelligent core, that central piece to this thing. But integration orchestration, development services, this external API ecosystem to outside the organization, and then the internal enterprise engagements within the actual applications within the organization, the sort of new central platform. So we've sort of been talking around it all day. We're basically saying there's a new way we're going to do IT, and this is what it's going to look like. From a Red Hat perspective, that platform, a lot of that platform is the next generation PaaS, or what we call container management platform. And wrapped around that is the service catalog that has integration services and API management, et cetera. Sort of one sort of centralized innovation hub to allow organizations to be fast and agile. He also made another prediction by 2020. Investors that are looking at putting valuations on companies will look at, do they have one of these digitally transformed platforms, these DX platforms in their organization? Are they able to monetize their data? Are they able to share the data with suppliers? Are they able to improve customer experience through sharing that data? Is it a data-driven organization? And in fact, some of the customer engagement metrics, such as I put here, Net Promoter Scale, these sort of 3 metrics will start to become part of the evaluation process of a company, which is quite new and revolutionary. I think today, roughly 20% of valuations are look at these type of 3 things today. So if we look at digital transformation, Gartner said that A lot of organizations are bringing innovation back in-house, right, with these innovation platforms. And if you wait too long, because the improvements in speed and performance and agility are not 10, 20, 30, 100% increases, in many cases, they are orders of magnitude. If you look at the Puppet Lab's recent report in 2017, and Christian was talking about that, the high-performance organizations are actually performing 2,500 times faster than their low-performing counterparts, their peers. So there's only a certain amount of runway before you can't catch up. McKinsey did a study for a lot of the market incumbents around how's this disruption happening in the market. And you got a couple S-curves that you see up here. They're kind of like integration signs for those who are mathematicians in the audience. But these are S-curves. So the blue one represents the incumbent business models, and the gray curve represents sort of that curve of how new business models emerge. They start to get some hold in the market. And then they accelerate to the point where they're dominant. And you cannot keep up with these new business models if you're not positioned properly with the right platform, organizational structure, and most importantly, culture. And we talked a lot about containers and microservices today. You know, there's a lot of organizations in Canada today that are running containers. The CVCD.ca website and all its subsites are all running on container-based technologies. They burst to Google Compute. They're looking to burst to other public cloud providers, and they're deploying new features daily. If you look at containerization and OpenShift, the central platform of innovation, the province of BC, when they have a new project and they need to provision new environments, right, those non-production supporting environments, they spend more time talking about the name of the project than deploying and provisioning all those environments, the test, the dev, the UAT, the SIT, the pre-prod. So a government agency going from, typically this was a 7-month endeavor, down to literally 12 minutes. In fact, they're literally starting to create digital services within a couple months as things happen in the constituency. And the province of BC is a great way of looking at a new innovation model, sort of open government. How many people here are from public sector, by the way? Some public sector folks, a few? Okay. This notion of government 2.0, open government as a platform, is the idea of government creating a platform that enables an e-marketplace above it, comprised of constituents, private enterprise, maybe nonprofit enterprise. And just like the road systems we have through the country, the government doesn't own the businesses attached to the roads, but they instantiate the rules and the policies of how those roads are run and managed. But they let the private enterprise sit on top of that platform. Effectively, what the province of BC has done is said, we're going to adopt and harness the power of the open source world. As we look to build new digital services, we're going to take an agile procurement methodology, specify requirements through a GitHub instance on bcdevexchange.org, and we'll ask the 33 million people around the world who are working in the open source space to actually build that service, that source code, and then they'll go through a verification testing perspective, and then they'll remunerate based on that. Really changing how government interfaces with the constituency and private enterprise. So the agenda, quickly, I've already talked about the New World Strategy, the art of the possible. Look, we're moving fast. Digital transformation, I want to talk a little bit about why change, why now. I think most organizations have adopted some sort of digital strategy. How many people do not sort of have an announcement from the organization that they have a digital strategy in place? Most people have. Okay, so everybody sort of agreed with that, but I'll quickly go through that if that's the case. So why change? Well, if you ask the 1,409 CEOs around the world, as PricewaterhouseCoopers did, 84% that they know they need to address broader stakeholder requirements, internal and external. And the good news for everybody in the room, one of their major influences on how to do that is technology. A survey done by Gartner to about almost 3,000 CIOs said that, these CIOs said that the digital revenue coming to the organization today's around 16%, and in the next 5 years it'll be 37%. So as we digitize our technologies within the organization and improving customer experience and loyalty, a lot of those revenues are going through new base technologies. And CEOs are really changing how they look at technology and how it's involved in the business. I think since the DevOps movement started, 2009, I think at the Velocity Conference was the first time I saw this kind of coming out. Technology and IT and business are almost one together, right? I've talked about how very technical metrics within the IT organization can influence market capitalization. Business and technology have come together. Now it's way beyond technology. We've already talked a lot about next generation architecture today, microservices, cloud native platforms. But I think DevOps and cultural changes I'll spend some time on later on the presentation. That's where it's key, where we need to rethink how we organize ourselves and do our work. And with that, tooling, mindset, practices, and we've touched on that in a few presentations today. Why now? If you look at IT professionals that were surveyed, 91% of IT professionals think they're going to be part of this digital transformation process, but 59% aren't quite sure how they're going to do it. So hopefully we're giving you some information today to help with that. So it's all about balancing innovation and optimization. I don't think we have any organizations in the room that have just greenfield in front of them. They do have a lot of legacy systems. But we need to balance innovation and optimization. Optimize the IT that you have, thinking about a standard operating environment, think about a manufacturing kind of concept of how you run IT, standard components that you can reuse, improve productivity in terms of integration. We've talked a lot about that today. Cloud, and build more modern applications. A lot of organizations are bringing applications back in-house so they can differentiate themselves in the code and in the data against their competitors. So if we spend a second on our vision of what open hybrid cloud is, we believe fundamentally that Linux, the operating system itself, is a true strategic asset in decision on where you're going to run your workloads. By having Linux available on all the public cloud providers, it's become sort of that foundational container construct. The Linux operating system really creates the containers within the environment. Docker layers the application packaging on top of that. But by having Linux as your core foundation, you can run traditional client-server, internet, and cloud-based applications wherever you want to. And with that comes a new sort of open hybrid management perspective where you need predictive analytics from Red Hat Insights as an example that goes out and manages and looks at application health, your configuration, and determines what changes you need to make before they actually happen. Ansible Tower and automation in general, be very focused on automation, take an automation default stance in terms of what you do within your organization. I think if there's one thing I want to leave with you today is to think about taking fingers off keyboards. Think about writing automation scripts, recipes, et cetera, to configure and to automate process workflows within your environment. To look at compliance and auditability. Red Hat Satellite is a way to patch and update and push content to all the Linux-based systems. And then Red Hat CloudForms is a cloud management layer that lets you manage the IT service lifecycle, whether it's on-prem or in a hybrid cloud format. So one of the fundamental questions that sort of help you understand if you're a high performer or low performer is this question. It actually came from Gene Kim. Gene Kim is one of the forerunners of DevOps. And the question is, like on a scale of 1 to 5, how confident are you in promoting a production change? If you were to take a developer, cut some code today, when does that code go to production? How long does that take? If it's same day, you're probably a high performer. If it's months, there's opportunities for improvement. And so to get there, some modern innovation approaches that you can adopt is looking at reusing, collaborating, and sharing. And we've talked about APIs being a way of doing that, microservices, and container technologies. So if we look at applications, and we've already talked about this, I won't spend any time, but you can rehost, replatform, refactor. A lot of applications you can containerize the legacy apps today, run them in the new platform, gain the efficiencies associated with that new platform. Rethink integration, it's kind of a different sort of approach to how we look at integration. We talked about API first, container deployment, and distributed integration. I don't think I need to spend much time on that. But provisioning, configuration, and orchestration of your assets is key. Looking at automating processes within the organization through business process management and any rules that you have within the organization that you can automate. You should do so, and then look at compliance and drift. Always have automation running so that you don't have drift and technical debt occurring within your organizations. Containers transform almost everything that we do in the approach that we do it, from applications to infrastructure to DevOps processes. And I think, as I said at the beginning, the container is such a fundamental way of giving predictability in the technology value stream. From when a developer actually cuts code on their MacBook or in their IDE, to when it goes to the testing environments, till when it goes to production, it's very, very predictable because you're combining all that it needs together within the container. Whether it's actually going through that technology value stream or whether it's you're making decisions of where you want to put that container into the public cloud environments. And development culture is one of the #1 things I think within Red Hat and most organizations and CEOs and CIOs I talk to. You know, how do I get to this generative culture? And we have an executive council where we bring in our top customers from around the world, and we ask them one question. He said, what's the one thing you need out of Red Hat? And they basically unanimously said, look, you need to show us how you do DevOps and innovate. You need to show us how to do that, not by telling us, but actually doing it with us. And that's why we created an offering called the Open Innovation Labs. And there's some people in the room who have actually been through this. This is it's basically a 2-4 week sprint kind of engagement. It's a residency where we marry up our developers who don't know what waterfall is. These are all high-end guys that have spent a lot of time in the Valley. And they walk you through building a minimal viable product. And we show up with all the tooling that you need to do so and to look at how you innovate. But in order to get there, you have to be honest with yourself and look at your organization. I think for the first time since almost the Industrial Revolution, we've said to ourselves, you know, we need to rethink how we organize ourselves and our processes and how we approach creating value for the company. Going away from the stovepipes of development to testing to pre-prod to release to ops to production, and reorganize ourselves in a DevOps model where you have a number of smaller teams that sort of have accountability right from the thought of an idea to it being coded to being promoted to production. So a lot of organizations have taken the approach to build a digital team off to the side of the rest of the organization in order to go through this new way of generating value for the company. We also have to think about, as Christian was just talking about, experimenting with your offers to the market and doing business hypotheses and leveraging DevOps to look at a methodology to allow you to do that safely and very fast. And one of the most important things, are you asking questions around collecting data, telemetry? Like the high performance organizations collect a lot of data, tons of data, telemetry data. Ideally push data from the application itself so you have an understanding of the experience that the end digital users are having. So I was going to spend a little bit of time on DevOps principles. There's sort of 3 key principles, and I've taken this from the how-to book on DevOps written by some of the forefathers of the DevOps movement, Gene Kim and others. And the fundamental first principle is trying to maximize the flow from development to operations. We've talked about creating small packages or batches of work every day, doing a daily deployment to production, being very quick. We talked about changing the structure of our teams to be, teams with cross-trained members, people that developers that sort of understand ops and ops that sort of understand developers. Security is part of the mix as well. You'll have a security aspect. You'll have a product owner in that team, sort of who owns that product, whether it's an API product that we talked about today or whether it's an application for a customer. You're trying to maximize flow. You're trying to break down handoffs between groups. Ideally, you lessen the number of handoffs, and you make everything visible. So when there is a stoppage in the flow or a bottleneck in the flow, in that technology value stream from development to production, you identify it, the team scrums and fixes it, and move forward. The second core principle is sort of this feedback loop. A lot of the DevOps movement is based on lean manufacturing principles that came out of the late 70s, early 80s. And Toyota was one of those companies that actually looked at this manufacturing line and thought about, how do we improve quality and speed? And they put in this concept within their assembly line as it follows the car being built. There's this thing called the andon cord. And the andon cord's there for one reason.
At each of the stations along that assembly line, if there is a missing part doesn't fit, it's the wrong part, it's missing a part, something doesn't work well, that person at that station will actually pull the end-on cord, and what it will do is stop the assembly line. And the first time I heard about this and I was reading about it, you know how many times Toyota employees pull this cord a day? 10 times, 100 times? 3,500 times they pull this cord, and I thought, how do they get anything done? But it turns out this is a continuous learning exercise so that we can fix those problems all the time, don't experience them in the future, and it causes a global learning program to go on. And that's that feedback loop that you see in the second principle, providing feedback to the environment and to the organization. The last part I've already touched on, this is where you start to think about experimentation and business hypothesis testing, and you're constantly testing the market in terms of your offer to the market. Scott from Intuit, he's the online tax guy that Christian was talking about. He does within his organization 50% of his changes to production during the tax season, which is crazy. I know there's a lot of financial people in the room. I can remember RSP season, nobody touches the systems. You got freeze. Well, this guy's putting in 50% of his change during his peak revenue periods. And what he was doing was experimenting with the market to convert people from browsing his online tax service to actually transacting with them and using it. He was making it specialized for different demographics and different people who are using his site. Our sort of view of the world when it comes to DevOps, microservices, kind of looks like this. And the sequence follows from your left to the right. You know, in order to go down this journey, you got to look at self-service, on-demand, and elastic infrastructure. We call it push-button infrastructure within Red Hat. Infrastructure as code is another term, but you need to automate the provisioning of infrastructure. Secondarily, you need to think about reorganizing yourself to a DevOps kind of model, organizational structure. Heavily invest in automation, be it Puppet, Chef, or Ansible, which is a Red Hat product, and look at containers. Instantiation of what a continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline. I don't think we've mentioned it, but continuous integration is the regular building of the application every day, all the time, so that we know it works, rather than writing code and then 6 months later we find it doesn't build in a test environment somewhere along the pipeline. So we need to create a pipeline that's very quick and have advanced deployment techniques that we talked about, that Christian just talked about around canary deployments, A/B, blue-green testing. And at that point, you could call yourself a Silicon Valley .com startup. You know the definition of a unicorn is? It's like a startup with a minimum of $1 billion market capitalization. So the usual guys, the Googles, the Facebooks, etc. So with that, the call to action. Thank you for your time today. Please network with other clients within the environment. I know there's a lot of Red Hat customers. How many customers are not Red Hat customers today? Or people are not a Red Hat customers? I think pretty much everybody's Red Hat. Thank you for your business. Oh, we got some new people. Come by and see me. Consider a central platform, the OpenShift platform, this central hub of innovation, and surround that with a service catalog to allow your developers and your innovators within your organization to consume middleware and integration-based services and engage with us. There's a bunch of Red Hatters around the room. Consider a discovery session with our Red Hat experts. We've had that on a few slides throughout today. And another call to action, I guess, if you're interested, we have some additional marketing events. If you saw value today, we have a JBoss workshop coming up on February 15th. I know it's fair ways out, but if you put it in your calendar today, you won't forget. And then we're running a Red Hat Day again. We did a Red Hat Day in the summer, and we're going to host one February 1st, and that's going to be around DevOps, automation, and digital transformation. I'm sure it'll be a lot of value, and it'll be some of the stuff that we talked about today. Now, when it comes to call to action today, I want you to think the technology choice that you make is effectively how you're innovating. We talked a lot about vendor lock-in. We talked about being faster and more agile. I encourage you to look at our portfolio and think about how it's going to impact how you do business today. Think about that centralized platform I just talked about from IDC, and come talk to us about that. Only 2 to 4% of our behavior comes from our conscious mind. The other part of it's all the unconscious mind. And there's a story about a plastic surgeon in the 50s. His name was Maxwell Marks. And he was surprised. He would do major facial changes through plastic surgery. And his patients would go to the mirror and say, "You didn't change anything." Meanwhile, they had major drastic changes done to them. He didn't know what that was, and he coined the term the psychosomatic mechanism. It's kind of like an autopilot. We all have an autopilot. It's built into our brains, it's built into our bodies. And so when we change our behavior a little bit, this autopilot, our habits and behaviors, we change, this autopilot within our non-conscious mind will kick in and put us back on what we do day to day, right? And so I urge you to look at what we talked about today, fight that urge to go back to your jobs and do the day-to-day task, and think about what we talked about today and engage us. We can help you change how you innovate through our technologies and some of our consulting services to get you to the point where you're competitive in the marketplace. And with that, thank you very much for your time. Please fill out the surveys. I believe we have some refreshments out back. The bar is open. And I look forward to talking with you. Thank you.